the top 10 albums of 2024. This is 5 to 9's Album of the Month, Album of the Year episode, part 2. I'm Andrew Belt, editor of the 5 to 9 blog, and joining me for the last time in 2024 are Karl Blakesley of New Music Central and Kiley Larsen, the founder of Santa Fe record label Mañana Records. Welcome, gents. So before we reveal our top 10, I'm just going to ask for a few more reflections on our Album of the Month podcast in 2024. So first off, you know, we had 11 months. We also had our wildcard, which we just did as an addition. But what was your favourite month? And Kiley, what was your favourite month?
Taking a look back through everything quickly right before we recorded this, even though some of the albums from this month are missing, I think I overall really liked March, which had Another Sky, Everything, which for me was the odd man out in that group. But Mannequin Pussy, Sure Mag, and Yard Act, I think that's a pretty solid month for me.
A vote for March. Karl, where was your favourite month this year?
Yeah, I mean, I would go March as well. I think that's reflected in my year-end standings. I mean, 4 of the albums in the top 30 from that month. I think the other one that probably ran it close was September, which two of the albums from that month I had very high up in my year-end, and then 2 of the others were in the top 50 as well. So yeah, definitely between March and September, but I think March just edged it.
Well, that wasn't. Although March and April were 2 which were in my almost made the top 3. And I think there's been loads of great months, to be fair. We've really we've upped our game. I think that's something we've reflected on a few times this year, and particularly myself. And in terms of some of the poor picks from last year, rather than giving myself a pat on the back here, backhanded compliment. But in terms of, you know, 2 I want to highlight before my pick, I think February was I really enjoyed. Had Idols, The Last Dinner Party, MGMT, Ali X, and Helado Negro. So that across the board was very good. August, if you had to pick one where there was no odd man out, I think August is right up there. We had Fontaines DC, Smashing Pumpkins, Pom Poko, Wonder Horse, and Taicho, all of which very, very strong records. But my pick is, claims of recency bias might be cast against me, but November. So the big hitters of Michael Kiwanuka, De Blonde, The Cure, and also Phaser Days, I add almost not quite those 3, but close. We won't mention The Reels, which we did on the previous episode, which did bring the average down somewhat, but that for me was the favourite. And yeah, going from the favourite to, in terms of the albums we've reviewed on the pod this year, what was your biggest disappointment? So I'll go with you, Karl.
Yeah, so in terms of biggest disappointment, I would say Peggy Gou's definitely up there. A lot of anticipation about that debut album. First time she's finally put out a full length. Usually it's one single a year. So yeah, that was definitely one of my most anticipated records, certainly of the summer. And although I enjoyed that record, I don't think it was as good as I was expecting it to be. So yeah, that was definitely for me probably the biggest disappointment, I would say. But not to say it's a bad record.
Kiley, what was your most disappointing this year?
I think runner-up, I would have Goat Girl. I really loved their record before this, and I recall in June it not being a great month overall, and still not seeing their new one elevated. For me, I hate to say this, but my biggest disappointment was back in January with New Dad. Loved their EPs. Loved about 4 or 5 songs from the full length debut, but just didn't translate to the full album for me.
Okay. We've gone from one pick from Karl, two to Kiley. I've got three, which I'm kind of run through. So, carrying on from where you left in January, I mean, Ty Segall, one of my favorite artists, for me, hasn't had an excellent record since Freedom's Goblin in 2019, 19-song kind of tour de force, really. And that was after a really strong run, which began with 2015's Manipulator. But seemed like after quite a few, he's incredibly prolific. There's usually at least one record from him this year. This year there was actually two. Didn't actually get around to his drum solo record. But yeah, they've been patchy, I would say, since Freedom's Goblin. There's always songs I enjoy from each of them, but just as a whole record. And I did feel that this had the sort of makings of one which was going to be a good, complete record again, particularly the kind of build up to it, 3 Bells, kicking that one off. And yeah, when it did come round to it, I think the first half I really enjoyed, first eight or nine songs, but then the second half just fell down a ditch, and sadly it just ended up being another disappointing record. But I have to go back to 2022, where my top 2 albums of that year, number 1 was Everything, the other was Nilüfer Yanya. Nilüfer Yanya this year, my Method Actor, is actually a really great record for me, but I think based on the expectations I had and based on the singles, which for me were going in the direction of something which could approach at being an album of the year contender, it kind of fell away a bit with the rest of the album, which I've grown to appreciate since seeing her live again. So very good one, but huge expectations. And then, won't sound good to Karl, but Everything's Mountainhead. So that was my record of the year 2022 with Raw Data Feel from Everything. But Mountainhead, liked the singles, but as an album just never really got into it. And it kind of continues my relationship with them where I'm kind of one on, one off, it seems. So I'm looking forward to their next one. Let's put it that way. So that's on the disappointing front. So Everything, my selection. And then just looking ahead briefly, what would you say is exciting you most about 2025? And yeah, diving back into a whole new year of releases ahead of us. So Kiley.
Okay, I'll keep 2 of these simple. We're gonna talk about them next month. But Rose City Band for me, I know I might be fighting an uphill battle on that one, but happy to have them back, and also looking forward to Marabou State's first album in quite some time. Ran through, I think they have 4 singles out right now for that one, and they're all just great. And then I have to go with a meme pick as well. Still waiting on Sky Ferreira's second album. Loved the Ghost EP in 2012. Loved her debut Nighttime My Time in 2013. And I know there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on with the record label, but it'll be 12 years. And every year we hear that the follow-up's coming out, and we're hearing the same for next year. So I'll put that out there. It's not coming out.
I've never heard of her. So is she what, a pop singer or?
Yeah, like synth pop.
Yeah.
Wow. 10 years ago, who knows what is 10 years later?
You never know. Yeah, Hayley Hendricks was one of those who just randomly I thought about, and like, because it'd been 2018 her debut, and then suddenly just at very short notice goes, yeah, 6 years later, here's the Sophomore. So fingers crossed. Karl, 2025, what's grabbing you?
Yeah, so I'll pick 3 for this one. So the first 2 are 2 bands from Nottingham that are getting a lot of buzz about them at the moment. Both have their debut albums out next year. The first one comes in January, which is Alt Black Era. It's a sister duo making alt rock music. So yeah, Their debut album comes out in January. The singles off that have been great so far. I think it's going to be just an album full of bangers. And yeah, they're still like, it still amazes me how young they are. I can't remember their exact ages, but they both recorded the album when they were still in their, late teens. So yeah, to hear what they're doing at such a young age, I think if they hit this debut out of the park, sky's the limit for those. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that one. And then the other band, indie outfit called Divorce, they've got their debut album coming out. I want to say it's March.
Yeah.
And again, they're just another band that have got a lot of momentum on their side, getting a lot of national exposure. And again, the singles that they've kind of released, their last few singles have been their best work to date. So again, high expectations for that one. But my top one for next year that's spinning out so far, My Boys in the Amazons. Have got their 4th album out next year. They've released 2 singles so far, and both of them are up there with 2 of the best songs that they've done. They've brought in some female vocalists for this album, which both feature on the 2 singles, and I think it just adds a whole new dynamic to their sound. Chris Alderton, their guitarist, for me, is one of the best guitarists or best young guitarists in the world right now. Some of the stuff that he can do. But yeah, both of those songs, big riffs, big choruses, and yeah, I can't wait to hear that album.
And then I had Divorce on the list, so very much looking forward to their debut. I think also in March there's the debut from Melon, Welsh band who certainly as a live act definitely worth seeing. I don't know how it would translate onto record, but let's see. They're really cool. And then other ones, new releases in 2025 I'm looking forward to. There's Young Knives kind of returning to their roots, their kind of indie roots, having gone off-piste in the intervening years. And January, The Murder Capital, so Gigi's Recovery was my favourite album in 2023, so intrigued to see what they do with their 3rd record. Richard Dawson, it's got one out in February as well, and certainly from seeing him live, the singles sound very promising and potentially, return to form of the likes of 2020 with what he's doing. And just a short word for Sam Fender as well, who I've enjoyed his first 2 records, and let's see what happens with album number 3. But that's 2025. We need to wrap up 2024. So we are now going to get into our top 10. It's a points-based system. So we had our top 20. You can watch the video or listen to the podcast of our 20 down to 11. But with these 20, we gave 20 points to our top pick, 1 to our bottom. And this is how we managed to get a collective amount. So first, in 10th place, for our second part of our end of year podcast, is Foxing with their self-titled record. This gained 33 points, as did our record in 9th. So we'll get to that. But with Foxing, Kiley gave the most points. So over to you.
Yeah, self-titled follow-up to Draw Down the Moon, which I've loved all Foxing records, but we kind of discussed this. It felt that one took a poppier turn on that record, and I don't think they got as much recognition. Foxing, the self-titled, kind of a joke at this point. Well, has been for decades, but when a band does a self-titled reset, this is the here's how we want you to hear us record. And I think this album just married together those popular albums that they had explored, but also just brought back a lot of the heavy post-rock and kind of Midwest emo that they've been doing, since 2014, and extremely happy with it. Some of these songs, especially the singles like Hell 99 and Spit, still some of my favorite songs of the album. And also enjoyed their kind of low budget critique of the industry that they had for this album rollout, that it was no one really cares about any of this, and we don't have any money to do anything, and it just felt really relatable with everything going on in 2024.
Great stuff. Really good one. It's certainly my first foray into foxing. So I mentioned, so basically foxing was actually joint ninth, because this I think is actually our last clash in terms of two albums on the same amount of points. But in ninth was a fairly big debut record, so Prelude to Ecstasy by The Last Dinner Party, and Karl gave the most points here, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, I mean, Last Dinner Party, it definitely felt like they owned like the first part of this year. Certainly the build up to that debut album coming out, and then the immediate aftermath. They, if I think back to that, the first few months of this year was kind of all about that. And it was one of those albums where I had enjoyed the singles kind of leading up to it, and it was kind of like, well, can they deliver on their first records? Obviously, there was a lot of good reviews coming out, which, again, at the start of the year, there was a lot of good reviews coming out for a lot of albums, and some of them we weren't kind of on board with. The Smile, just to name one. But yeah, I think this was one that really delivered. I think they really knocked it out the park. Although I maybe don't go back to it as much as I did in those kind of first few months. I think definitely, the standout tracks from that album still hold up. Portrait of a Dead Girl, still my absolute favorite off that record. Obviously, all the singles, Nothing Matters, My Lady of Mercy, they still sound just absolutely fantastic. And I think the big thing for them now will be, because they have taken a lot of stick this year. I think there's a certain audience that really seems to want them to fail, which, I don't think is very fair, but, that's kind of, where we're at, where, any band gets a lot of attention on them, there's always going to be detractors and a lot of haters. And I think the big thing for them now is, can they deliver on their second album? I know when I saw them, they played, I think it was one or two new songs, and they certainly sounded as good as what was on the record. So yeah, that'll be the big thing for them now. They've had this amazing debut, but we've music history is littered with bands that have had amazing debuts and then gone on to do nothing after that. So fantastic year for Last Dinner Party, and just keen to see where they go from here.
Good stuff. And then I think we reviewed them after one of those controversies as well, so that was very much part of our of that review, which, like all or most of these, you can find on our YouTube channel, of course. So in 8th place, and kind of bucking the trend that this isn't maybe number one, if you look at most releases or even the aggregate score, if you haven't worked out already, Charlie XCX Brat gained 36 points, and Karl had the most Brat Summer. So you get to run us through your feelings on that record, which was the winner, by the way, of our wildcard picks. So
yeah, and I think when we were thinking of those wildcard picks, I certainly, in terms of my scoring as well, when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, what are the albums that we've not looked at this year that we probably should have a looked at? Charlie was in the mix for June, but obviously we had Peggy Goo and obviously Swim Deep that I picked, but Charlie was definitely in the mix for me in June, and we just missed it from the selection, which was a big miss. So yeah, the fact that it kind of made it through in the wild card round, I think it needed to be in here. I think if you were choosing the album of the year based on, cultural significance, I don't think there's been an album even in the last few years that seems to have, just had the impact that Brat has had. And I've just kind of said it to you guys before, although I still don't think it's my favorite Charlie XCX record. I still think it's great. There's not really a bad moment on there. There's some great certainly some great highs on there. For me, I still just prefer how I'm feeling now, which was her lockdown record, the first ever lockdown album. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of cultural significance, this is the album of the year by a long shot. From the festival outfits to rocking up in Kamala Harris's presidential campaign to the dictionary word of the year. It's been quite crazy, and I think it couldn't have happened to a better pop star. Really, I think Charlie has been grinding away for for over a decade now, and she's just been her output over that time has been fantastic. And she's really been due this moment for a long time. I think it's, great that words finally got out. I was lucky enough to go to the Brat Tour at the end of November. And I think that's really where it hit home, this cultural phenomenon that album has created. It was, just walking through the arena and seeing everyone in their Brat outfits and, going crazy to the songs. Like the whole set list was basically that album. And I think that really hit home, like what she has, how that album's connected with a lot of people this year. So yeah, definitely one that had to be in here, I think. And yeah, I'm just so happy it's happened to Charlie. I mean, when you see other great pop stars in recent years, such as Caroline Polachek, CMAT, Ray, they've all said in interviews recently her influence that she had on their careers, which, given that there's not much kind of age difference between them, is quite remarkable as well. So, yeah, great to see Charlie get her moment, and yeah, great album from this year.
Yeah, like I say, a little bit lower than in most lists, but still appreciated for sure. And sticking with you, Karl, in 7th place on 39 points, so 3 above Brat, we have Ness by Hayden Thorpe. I mean, almost diametrically opposed records.
Yeah.
But over to you to, summarize.
Yeah, I mean, so this is coming in as my album of the year. I think I was kind of between 3 albums when I was deciding, what album has summed up this year for me. But then I looked at my Apple Music playlist, and the fact that this dropped at like the end of September, and it was in the top 2 with, everything that came out in March. So I was like, and that's not even included like I did the review for Clash, and I was, listening to it a bunch on the pre-release stream. So I think that really signified, this was the standout for me. And, what is it that brought me back to this album so much? I think the main thing for me was just how different it is to everything else I've heard this year. From the woodwind instrumentation that is kind of like the anchor. It's not the guitars and the bass, the drums that we're kind of used to. It is, strings and woodwind and synths, and it's kind of this new sonic palette that just hasn't been on any other records this year. And then I think in terms of, the structure of the album as well, it's almost, it's a bit like an audiobook. It's a bit like an album. It's a bit like spoken word poetry. And it just creates this amazing experience. And like I said, unlike anything else that I've heard this year. I think the ambition of the project as well, just to take this National Trust site that, I certainly didn't know anything about going into the record, taking Robert McFarlane's book and, translating it to music, I think, again, is just something that not a lot of artists are doing. And I think, that for me is what draws me to Hayden is, when you listen to as much music as, we do, it isn't often where it's like, every album's got its touch points. You're like, oh yeah, this reminded me a bit of this. This reminded me a bit of this. And I think this was one of those projects from this year where it was like really stood on its own, and I think that's what made it stand out for me in 2024. So yeah, phenomenal album. And Hayden just continues to be one of the most interesting artists for me.
And do check out Karl's interview on our YouTube channel with Hayden. So yeah, still leading the view count on our videos there, but where you can get a deeper dive into Ness, whether Wild Beast might reform, that sort of thing. So yeah, really good listen that one is, or watch rather on YouTube. So yeah, going on to 6th place, just 1 point above Ness collectively. We had Humble as the Sun by Bob Dylan, and Kiley gave the most points for this one. So over to you to summarize.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun that I ended up rating this one the highest because I had the least experience with Bob Dylan, only, hearing bits and pieces. But this album, Humble as the Sun, came out in April, and I had it on all summer. 2024 was another uneasy year, and Bob Dylan, I think, covered so many topics, whether it's music industry, whether it's misogyny, whether it's capitalism. There's just so many, applicable themes that, whether you're in the UK, the US, or pretty much anywhere else right now, this is just a record that I think is just such a spot on snapshot of where things are at right now. And when I look back and, a decade from now, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that, Humble as the Sun was so definitive at that time. Great record.
Yeah. And yeah, great follow up to their last one, The Price of Life, as well. So we get to our top 5 now. So we're getting really close to revealing our favourite from the 60 we've reviewed this year on the pod. And so we have A Dream Is All We Have in 5th spot by the Lemon Twigs. And just, again, another point ahead of Bob Dylan on 41. So 39, 40, 41. Yeah. What did you make of that one, and how do you look back? This was one in May, of course, which is becoming a bit of a habit, and one which I hope they continue.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that might be getting another record soon. Heard rumors of Brian and Michael putting out solo records. Whatever they do, I think we'll continue to be happy about it here. For me, A Dream Is All We Know is my album of the year. I think that's, if you've listened to me or, have to be a friend of the ears about it all the time. Last couple of years have just been dominated by the Lemon Twigs for me. And yeah, I think this was my most listened to album of the year. And that's not including all the times I played the record. And I was thinking back to a couple of weeks ago when I back to back put on this one and Everything Harmony from last year, and then threw on their I can't remember what that EP was called, Brothers of Destruction. I threw that record on after that, and my wife said, I can't just listen to Lemon Twigs tonight. So that's kind of how my house has been this year since May. And yeah, just these guys, savants, they're great.
Definitely, yeah, agree on that front. And a band we've all seen, you and Karl together in the US. Was that Philadelphia?
That was it.
Yeah. And for me, obviously all my shows, I think I had about 60 plus local shows that I ran this year. And while they're all fantastic and enjoyable, that for me, the Lemon Twigs in Philly, that was my gig of the year.
Yeah, it was very
For me as well.
Your gig of the year as well.
Well, right up there. I still need to do my gig list, but it's definitely going to be up there. It's going to, yeah.
I can't remember what number I put, but they certainly featured on the 5 to 9 one, having been fortunate enough to see them at End of the Road. Not once, but twice. They did one of the secret sets as well, late into the night, which was very pleasing, I gotta say. And just, yeah, they're just so good. So yeah. We now move on to 4. So Songs of a Lost World by The Cure, their first album in 16 years. 2 points above A Dream Is All We Know on 43. So all really, really tight, actually, until we get to our final 2. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to be the least knowledgeable about The Cure, but I gave them the most points out of the 3 of us, so I'll give it a stab. And again, first touch point, like some of the other ones I referred to in the previous pod, in our 20 to 11 roundup. But just, full marks for atmosphere here. Really sonically pleasing, and one you can just really just absorb yourself in. It's not a summer record, so I think November was a good time for them to. I mean, we've read the interview where Robert Smith said that he wanted it to be on Halloween, but obviously Friday was the first, so it was closest he could get to that wish of his. And yeah, I think from what I've read and also your input, Karl and Kiley on this record certainly seems to be one of their most direct from a lyrical inspiration point of view. So some quite direct lyrics about the death of Robert's brother, for instance, on one of the songs here. There's 8 songs, but they're quite long, epically crafted ones. And yeah, general themes of kind of existential dread, but also the importance and value in being around others and those you love. So for all those reasons, it's just truly absorbing and an interesting listen. And I think we all had the same favorite song, that Drone No Drone, where it goes a bit rockier as well. So there's just a really fascinating one, and one you can go back to and learn a little bit more, and also how Robert kind of took the reins in every aspect of this record, with the music arrangement, obviously the lyrics, and presumably the production as well to an extent. So and
don't forget Picture of Stone
and the Picture of the Stone. Yeah, it does look like something like AI would create or something, to be fair. It's arty, because I think even the singles. So
what were those Greeks thinking?
So yeah, and didn't even win our album of the month either. So actually, I think what did win out in November? So it did. Forget me. We'll move on. So now we go on to our 3rd placed record, and it's then we're going to hear once from each of us as we build up to our number 1. So it's over to Karl for our 3rd place record, which is Marika Hackman with Big Sigh, and then that was just 1 point above The Cure. So we had a few in a row, really tightly packed together, 44 points.
Yeah, so obviously released in January. I think it was the 3rd album I listened to all year. So right at the start of January as well, this one came out, and it's stayed with me right until the very end, which I think is the sign of any great record. I mean, sometimes these albums come out in January and you've completely forgotten about them by the time November has rolled around. But no, this is one that I have revisited repeatedly over the last 12 months. It's just been, it's just one of those records where the songs just bury themselves into your skin. Obviously quite a tough listen at times. Hearing Marika talk about this, toxic relationship to quite violent extent in the lyrics, but that's always kind of offset by the soft instrumentation and the beautiful sounds that she creates. She also played everything on this record, which still kind of blows my mind. Whenever anyone kind of does that on an album, it's always impressive. But certainly when you listen to like the multi-layered instrumentation that's spread across this thing, the fact that you're just hearing Marika, it is quite mind blowing. So yeah, several of my favorite songs of the year on this one, and it was kind of capped off by seeing her live at Leeds just last month, middle of November. Missed her when she played her album launch show at Nottingham at the start of the year, and I'd spent the whole year regretting that moment of not going to that show. So yeah, just to finally see her last month, having lived with this album for all that time, it was just such an incredible moment. And yeah, just without a doubt, Hayden just pipped it, but yeah, this was right up there as well as one of my albums of the year.
So there's third. We're on the podium now, so bronze for Marika. But yeah, just missing out. And so Marika was on 44 points. On 51, Beach Day by Another Sky. And this is one which I gave the most points to. And yeah, a band who this is their third record. No, second record, I think. And yeah, they had one come out before the pandemic. The pandemic nearly tore them apart. Basically, some very interesting interviews that they've done in support of Beach Day. And one I think which I think is lucky that got it onto the pod, to be quite frank. It wasn't a first pick, it was my old pick. And it's one of those which shows that, Wikipedia is good, but if you want to really get into the weeds of what's out on a regular basis, albumoftheyear.org. Because fortunately I looked there as well as Wikipedia, and that's where I found Another Sky, and I thought, yeah, they're a band I've seen live before. I think they got quite an intriguing sound. I thought I quite liked their debut. So I thought, let's listen to what the songs preceding it are. They kind of really encouraged me. And unfortunately, on the poll, it did win out and brought it to us. And I'm sure you'll find me say that all of us were really this one nearly took home the overall prize. And I was pretty blown away, I've got to say, because that first record, like I say, was a good start for them, I think. But this one, and like I say, taking into account some of the challenges they've had in the preceding years, to come back with a record with such oomph. And one which I tend to compare to Jagged Little Pill in the kind of lyrical matter here. It's toxic relationships. It's saying almost those unspoken things which you kind of hush in your mind. So there's no lack of bite throughout, but also it takes you on a journey where, yes, there is that, and there's toxic relationships and realizing, some of those are not right for you. But towards the end, finding peace and, seeing better days ahead. So, I love a narrative arc on an album. And this really sort of ticked those boxes, and just generally some of the best rock songs I heard all year. So yeah, just massively impressed. Think it is worth saying as well that I hope that this isn't the last we hear of them. I did have a ticket to see them in October. I was really looking forward to that. And first of all, got postponed to 2025. Then it got fully cancelled, and there was a note from the band saying that unforeseen circumstances, things have changed. There's got to be a statement soon. So I really do hope that we hear more music from them. And like I say, really pleased as well. This is one which you guys enjoyed as well. So not quite the number one spot, but a very, very strong record, and one which, from March's album of the month to second in our year list, which, emulates Caroline Polachek last year, which is a very high bar. Like I say, excellent work. But we've had Karl with the bronze. I've given the silver, and for gold, and for the final say, it's over to Kiley now with the most points which he gave for our collective number one record, and it squeaked past Another Sky on 52 points, just the 1 point difference. Brat was a cultural phenomenon, but in a similar vein, maybe not quite as widespread, was this band from Ireland. So Fontaines DC, Romance, the fourth record from the Irish, Dublin post-punk bands, and going off in a new but very, very pleasing direction. And yeah, over to you, Kiley, to sort of share your views on our winner of the album of the year from our 60, which we've gone through.
Yeah, and I'm glad you when I saw the list of who's going to cover what, and I was trying to think of what to say about this. I thought, while it culturally is a smaller moment, it is kind of the brat of the rock world. And, I think the reason that Fontaines DC Romance is well-deserved of a number one spot is that I think, especially in rock music, there's nothing harder than making a jump to more mainstream. This isn't necessarily a pop record, but compared to their roots, this is the most accessible Fontaines DC record yet. And for me, it's my favorite, going back to the first album. And I think Fontaines, they're so far ahead of the game, critical darlings as post-punk rockers, when they came out. But I think over the last few years, they've been the quickest out of these UK post-punk bands to see the writing on the wall, and that's not necessarily the long-term solution. And they brought in James Ford, who's a very, big-time producer for this one. And, they mix in hip-hop and grunge and shoegaze and all these different things to ultimately make a really unique record. And same thing with the post-punk scene. The grunge revival, I think, at least to me, is already playing out pretty quickly. And what they've done with the grunge elements here, I think, is better than most anyone else is doing that right now. So these guys continue to just take a massive step. A lot of the times these UK and Irish bands don't make the jump to the States, but Fontaines DC, since the beginning, have been a big deal here, and I see more about them than I ever have right now. So they're globally, really, really taking it right now, and it's well deserved.
Definitely, and yeah, massive things next year with their show in Alexandra Park, which we referred to when in the previous pod with Ammo and the Sniffers supporting them there, and Karl's pick for the one which missed out in terms of the 60 we had with Kneecap as well on that roster. So that's shaping up to be quite a lineup. But yeah, we joked about wearing the garish, luminous kind of tracksuits in honor of this record. But yeah, has been, they continue to just hit those high standards and evolve. And it's virtually every year, isn't it? Green and Chatham we had last year, and we were very complimentary of that record, very different. And then, the three previous they brought out as well, all just way up there. So
got to say as well, like, in terms of some of the singles of the year, Starburst, their favourite, In a Modern World, all three of those would be right up there for me.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, what really hit it home for me, I saw them at the arena here in Nottingham, and, there's been some big artists play there this year. I was lucky enough to go see Kings of Leon, which obviously don't have the momentum that they once did, but still a, big festival headliner. Also, Sum 41's final show, where you think that would pack them in. And, by comparison, Fontaine's DC, every single seat in that arena was taken. From the hospitality boxes to, the standing on the floor, it was full. And that's where it kind of really hit home to me. These guys have really taken off now. So great to see. Great to see.
So there we have it. And following in the fabled footsteps of young fathers who took the inaugural Album of the Year prize from the 5 to 9's Album of the Month podcast. Huge congratulations to Grian and the lads. Capping a fantastic year for them. So we will now be taking a small break to enjoy some festive frolics, but we will be returning in January. And we'll share our lineup plus the poll where we ask you to pick the 5th album for that episode very soon. As ever, you can stay up to date with what we're up to by following 5 to 9 on Twitter or X and Instagram, New Music Central via @Karl Blakesley via Instagram and Threads, and Mama Mañana Records via @Mama Mañana Records on Instagram. All that's left for me to say is a huge, huge thanks to Karl and Kiley for another great year of the pod. Really just love getting your insights on music and having that opportunity on a monthly basis to run through everything with you. Always such a pleasure. And thanks to you for listening. We look forward to returning in 2025.